A few years ago, I rented a house on the countryside. My neighbor were a married couple named Lisa and Michael. They had two young children, a boy and a girl. They were a nice, quiet family and pretty much kept to themselves. One night, I was awakened by a blood-curdling scream. It sounded like it was coming from the house next door. I jumped out of bed and threw on my dressing gown and ran downstairs. When I got to my front gate, two small figures came flying at me and almost knocked me off my feet. I realized it was the kids who lived next door, but I was stunned by their appearance. The boy was in his pajamas and the girl was in her nightie. Their faces were deathly pale and they looked up at me with terror in their eyes. Both kids held on to me and began to cry. Their mother came rushing towards us and I could see she was terrified as well. "What happened?" I asked. "I heard some screams." "There's someone in our house," Lisa gasped, her voice shaking with fear. I heard someone in the kitchen. I was too afraid to go check. Then I heard someone climbing the stairs, and I heard the door to my children's bedroom opening. Then I heard my daughter screaming. It was terrible. I immediately got the kids and we ran out." "Well, did you see who it was?" I asked. "No," she replied. "The children ran out of their bedroom. I didn't dare check it. Please help us. We need you to call the police." I looked at the children, still trembling with fear. "Where's their father?" I asked. "He's working the night shift," Lisa said. I told them to go into my house and I'll call the police. She thanked me, took her children by the hand, and they ran into my house. I decided to check out their house. Their front door was still open. It was dark and silent. All of a sudden, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I had the strangest feeling that someone was watching me. In the back of my mind, a little voice kept telling me, "It's a trap." I don't know what came over me, but at that moment I was very scared. Scared of the unknown, scared of what might be lurking inside that darkened house. "Pull yourself together," I muttered. "You're not a child anymore." I started to walk up the garden path, but then I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. Click! In one of the upstairs windows, the light suddenly came on. The house was supposed to be empty. I looked up at the lighted window, but I didn't see anything, just curtains blowing in the breeze. "There's something up there," the little voice in my head whispered, "and it's not afraid of being found. In fact, it wants you to find it." I tried to tell myself I was just being silly. How stupid was it for an adult man to be afraid to go in a house because he was afraid of ghosts? It's a thief, I thought to myself. But then why would they switch on all the lights? Then the light turned off. What the hell? I thought, and took a few steps back. I just did not see anything in the darkness, but I felt goosebumps rising on my skin. Then the light turned on again. When I looked up at the window, my heart skipped a beat. There was a dark figure standing there. It was a woman. Her skin was taut and shriveled, and her hair was long and messy. She looked like a corpse. She just stared down at me with her hollow, empty eye sockets, and she smiled a dead smile. Then the light went out again. I turned and ran back to my own house. When I got to my front door, I banged on until the neighbor lady let me back in. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and anxiety. My face was pale and my eyes were so frightened that the children began to cry again. "Water," I panted. I need water." Lisa grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and handed it to me. I downed it in one gulp. My heart was pounding and I had broken into a cold sweat. I was afraid that I was having a heart attack. "Did you call the police?" I asked, trying to pull myself together. "They're on their way," she said. "Did you check the house?" Let's just wait for the police," I replied. A few minutes later, the police finally arrived. They searched the house from top to bottom, but they didn't find any thief. There was no one there at all. The police questioned the neighbors, but nobody had seen or heard anything. When they questioned me, I didn't tell them what I had seen. What could I tell them? That I had saw a dead woman in the window, smiling an unearthly smile? Nobody would believe me. The police eventually finished up their business and left to take care of more important things. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, the woman's husband came home. The children were glad to see him, and together the family returned to their house. I tried not to look at their house, especially at the upstairs window. After that crazy night, I began to have trouble sleeping. As soon as I closed my eyes, I would see that face of the dead woman. Then, life seemed to get back to normal. The neighbors gradually managed to forget all about the incident. No one screamed during the night, and I didn't see any dead bodies standing in windows. Everything seemed to be back on track and life was good. But one evening, about a month later, I heard someone knocking on my front door. The knock was loud and strong. They kept banging and banging as if they were going to break my door down. I looked through the peephole and saw that it was my neighbor, Lisa. I opened the door and found her standing there grinning at me. What happened? I asked. She didn't reply. She just smiled and walked straight past me. She went into my house and turned left into the living room. She left me standing on the doorstep, dumbfounded. That fixed smile on her face unnerved me. It was so creepy, almost inhuman. It made me shiver from head to toe. It was dark outside and no birds were singing. I was about to go follow her inside when I heard voices coming from the house next door. When I glanced over the fence, I saw the neighbor children playing in their front yard. Then, I froze. I could not believe what I was seeing. Lisa was there. She was standing in their front yard playing with the children. I couldn't move. It felt like my entire body was paralyzed with fear. The little voice in my head was asking only one question. If Lisa is over there, then who is in my living room? I didn't stop to check. I immediately ran out of the house next door and asked my neighbors to call the police. 2 officers arrived and searched my house from top to bottom, but they didn't find a living soul. How could they? The only person in my house was a dead woman. The next morning I left the house and I didn't come back. Now I live in a city where all the people there are more alive than dead. I heard that my former neighbors, Michael and Lisa, moved out soon after I left. I asked around, and one of my family friends said the reason they moved out was because the mother and father of the family had gone insane. They're such fools, my friend laughed. They thought that their house was haunted. I tried to laugh along with him, but I couldn't even muster a smile. One evening, I was driving along a lonely mountain road. The light was fading fast and it was beginning to rain. I had been driving for hours and my eyes were tired. I was having trouble staying awake. As I negotiated a sharp bend, I noticed a man hitchhiking by the side of the road. Taking pity on him, I pulled over and picked him up. As he got into the car, he thanked me for stopping. My car broke down, he said. I thought I was going to be stuck out there all night. We drove off down the mountain road. It started to get darker and the rain grew heavier. You're not from around here, said the man. No, I replied, I'm not. You know, this area is a black spot, said the man. It's a dangerous road. Over the years, there have been many fatal accidents. Really? I asked, surprised. It doesn't look dangerous. Looks can be deceiving, he replied. Countless victims have lost their lives here. Not all of them were killed in a car crash. The locals say this stretch of road is haunted. Just then, I saw something up ahead. There was a young woman standing in the middle of the road. In the glare of the headlights, I could see that she was very beautiful. She was wet from the rain and the flimsy white dress she was wearing was see-through. She looked almost naked. As I slowed down to take a closer look, the man in the passenger seat suddenly became upset. "No, it's a trick," he said. "That woman is a decoy. Look in the rear mirror." I glanced behind me just in time to see an old woman about to open the rear passenger door. Her face was rotting and covered with withering maggots. We both screamed as I floored the accelerator and the car lurched forward. We tore out of there like a bat out of hell and never looked back. When we reached the next town, I dropped the man off at a gas station and thanked him for saving my life. I don't think I'll ever drive down that lonely mountain road again. When I was 4 years old, my mom and I moved into a large colonial house that was built in the late 1800s. My mom always had a weird feeling about this house. There was a little bricked off section in the basement, and we never knew why it was there. My mother told me that soon after we moved into the house, I suddenly had an imaginary friend. One day, out of the blue, I told her that I'd been playing with a little girl named Jenny. She thought that it was just a phase and didn't pay much attention to it. I told her that Jenny wanted me to let the cat go downstairs into the basement so that she could play with it. My mother allowed me to let the cat go down there, but it never came back. That creeped her out. Then, a few days later, I told her Jenny wanted me to go down into the basement to play with her. My mother refused and told me to go upstairs to bed. I did, and when I woke up the next morning, I had deep scratches on the back of my legs. My mom decided to research the history of the house. She found an old picture of the house and the family who used to live there. She showed me the picture and asked if I recognized any of them. There were 7 little girls in the picture, and without hesitation, I pointed to one of them. The names of all the family members are written on the back. The girl that I had pointed out was named Jenny. My mother got scared because during her research she had discovered that the girl named Jenny had gone down into the basement one day and was never seen again. The family never found her and they moved shortly after that. After I identified the girl in the picture, it was all way too much for my mom to handle. We moved out of the house and found somewhere else to live. When I turned 18, my mom told me all about what had happened in that house. It still scares me to think about it. A middle-aged man named Trevor Bailey had just moved into a new apartment in Seattle. He was in the city shopping for furniture, but couldn't find anything that took his fancy. He was a man with taste for unusual furniture, but every furniture shop he entered seemed to have nothing that interested him. Frustrated, he wandered down a narrow side street and eventually found himself outside an old antique shop. On the spur of the moment, he went inside to see if there was anything worth purchasing. He was browsing through the aisles when he came across an odd-looking treasure chest. There and then, he decided to buy the curious piece of furniture. Handing over the money, Mr. Bailey asked the antique dealer to have the chest delivered to his apartment that very evening. Hours later, he was sitting on the sofa in his living room watching TV when he happened to glance to his left and saw something that made him gasp. Peeking out of a hole in the side of the treasure chest, he was sure he could see a pair of bloodshot eyes. They seemed to be staring directly at him and glinting maliciously. Mr. Bailey was overwhelmed with a sudden feeling of inexplicable fear and sat motionless for a few seconds. Then, overcoming his terror, he jumped up and ran to the chest, flinging open the lid. Inside, he found the chest was completely empty. Puzzled, Mr. Bailey returned to the sofa and tried to calm his nerves. He told himself that it was just his imagination, but he found it hard to get the hideous image out of his mind. For the rest of the night, he felt strangely ill at ease and made an effort not to look at the chest. He was simply terrified at the thought of what he might see. At the end of the night, Mr. Bailey was beginning to forget about his unusual experience and put it down to a trick of the light. Just as he was about to go to bed, he stood up and couldn't resist taking one last look at the chest. He froze and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. There were the hideous eyes. They were peeking out at the same hole as before, staring at him with evil intent. In a state of shock, Mr. Bailey let out a strangled scream and the eyes suddenly vanished from the darkened hole in the side of the chest. When he cautiously approached the treasure chest and carefully opened the lid, he again found it completely empty. By now he was at his wit's end, and he decided that he must rid himself of the mysterious piece of furniture. Mr. Bailey picked up his phone and called a removal service. He told them to come bright and early the next morning. He said he had an old treasure chest that he wanted them to pick up and cart off to the city dump. As he hung up the phone, he breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a little more relaxed now than he had arranged to get rid of the chest. He went to bed. That night, Mr. Bailey lay in bed, tossing and turning, his brain plagued by a torturous nightmare. In his dreams, he saw the bloodshot eyes again. They were peeking out at him from every crack and crevice in his apartment. The disgusting eyes seemed to follow his every move, and it felt like there was no escape from their evil gaze. He awoke suddenly in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. His heart was pounding at an alarming rate. The memory of the horrible eyes was tormenting him, and he found himself unable to fall asleep again. Filled with an uneasy sense of foreboding, he got out of bed and tiptoed silently down his hallway. Quietly opening the door to his living room, Mr. Bailey saw the treasure chest sitting ominously in the corner. Everything seemed peaceful and undisturbed, just as he had left it only hours before. But something about that chest still bothered him. When he had gone to bed, he was sure he had closed the lid of the chest, but now it stood open. A sudden chill surged through his body. He felt as if the treasure chest was waiting for him, daring him to approach it. Like a man in a trance, he felt unable to resist and walked slowly towards the open chest. The next morning, workmen arrived to pick up the chest. They found the front door standing open and the old treasure chest standing in the middle of the room. The workmen lifted it onto a dolly and wheeled it outside to the street where the van was waiting. As they loaded the chest in the back of their van, the men never heard the muffled screams coming from inside. As they drove to the city dump, they never heard the desperate knocking coming from the old treasure chest. When they got to the dump, the workmen backed up their van to the edge of a cliff and pushed the chest off the side. It fell straight down, crashing against the rocks and turning end over end as it plummeted to the bottom. With a mighty splash, it hit the water below and sank quickly, disappearing beneath the surface. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.